the beatitudes, this conversation that Jesus is having with the disciples. I want to just, before we jump into that, the context is incredibly helpful of where this conversation comes from, I think. The chapter 4, which we reflected on last week, was when Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, tempted then by the tempter. And after that exchange that Jesus had, if you read the rest of Gospel of Matthew, the 4th chapter, Jesus calls his first disciples into ministry. And after he calls the disciples into ministry, Jesus gets to work immediately. Now, I like to reflect a little bit of when the disciples were invited to, hey, just go ahead and leave everything and follow me. I'm the Son of God. I'm the Messiah. I want to show you what this is about. I mean, I don't know, what if that was you? What would you think? I mean, I would be like, oh, this is going to be great. I mean, we're with the best of the best, so we're going to go hang out with the elites, and we're going to kind of, do some theological wrestling with the Pharisees and Sadducees, the ones that they think they have it all figured out. We're going to be able to just ignore the lowly and the outcasts in our community. We're going to go and really be able to have relationships with the really important people that matter. The really important people, not the nagging people that are mourning or who are sick or who are in need. We'll just keep brushing them to the side. I'm a disciple of Jesus. I'm going to get to work with the real people. But what the disciples saw shortly after they were invited into relationship and called into ministry is that the people that were sick after people that were sick were coming to Jesus, and Jesus was healing them. Their first interactions weren't with the ones that had it all figured out, but were with the ones that were in need the most. And I almost feel like Jesus reading the audience of the disciples and what was going on as they were watching the long line of those who had ailments and were needing and seeking Jesus. I almost feel like Jesus is like, okay, I think they're a little freaked out. We better just sit down and have a conversation quick. And so Jesus sat with the disciples. And again, I want to remind you, when we hear disciples, your imagination needs to go well beyond 12 guys, right? We know that Jesus was in discipleship relationship with more than just the 12 disciples. Why did they only tell us about the 12 men? I don't know, but we have enough scriptural evidence to say there were men and women present. And it was more than 12. Okay. Get off my soapbox. So Jesus sits down. And Jesus says this to them: Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are the poor in spirit. I missed one, I'm sorry. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I mean, I can almost be like, whoa, Jesus. No. Blessed are the smart people. The ones that have done a lot of studies. I mean, they don't have much to worry about. Blessed are the rich people. I mean, if you have a lot of money, you just kind of dole it out and buy anything and everything that you need. Blessed are the ones that have their act together. They aren't in need to have to line up and have you heal them. That's who God's blessed. It's pretty evident. It's pretty obvious. They're doing pretty well. What are you talking about here? Blessed is the poor in spirit. Blessed is those who mourn. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be the children of God. The first of many times that the world has to be in shock of the work that Jesus has come to do. And this work that Jesus has come to do matters for you and for me. Because these statements, these beatitudes, this conversation that Jesus has with the disciples are just as transformative and shaping for us as it was for them. Because sometimes I think we get down this track of like, well, God has blessed the ones that have their act together and that are the most wealthy and whatever we want to bless it are those that are taller than me or shorter than me, faster than me, slower, whatever the case is. We want to get this mindset because if I were more blessed, life would be a little better. That's not what Jesus says here. All of us, we are all in the midst of these statements right here, right now. And here's why. Maybe today you are mourning. You are the one Jesus is talking about, that you are blessed because you are mourning. Now, if you are, I want, as one who has experienced grief and loss, I want to say, I don't feel super blessed right now, as I'm overwhelmed with all of the emotions that are tied to loss. And Jesus is saying, blessed are you, John? Blessed are you, John, who still has this void with his mother's death almost 5 years ago? I can't believe it's been 5 years, because some days it feels like it was yesterday that my mom was still alive. I can still hear her voice. I can still feel her presence in the room. I can still sense her reshaping my ideas to make the best choice. And some days, I don't feel like a mourner. And then other days, I do. I know shortly after my mom died, it was daily that I was overwhelmed with grief. The emotions that just bombard us at the time of loss. Having to sit down with my children and tell them that their Nana had died. And then a couple days later, Samantha asked us, so when do we get to see Nana again? Just not setting in. And then 3-4 months later, out of nowhere, a memory pops up and the tears start streaming down and take over again. And then December 28th, 2018, just weeks ago, my family gathered together for our Christmas celebration, and there's still a void in that room. I am the one who Jesus is speaking to because I mourn, and here is my promise. John, you will be comforted. This is the Jesus. This is God's Son who has come to the world to declare to you and to me that in our lowest moments, in our most difficult times, when we don't have any of our stuff together, there Christ meets us. And how does that happen? How are we comforted? And this is why I mean we're all tied in, because sometimes we are the comforters. Sometimes it's that hug that you give a friend who is struggling through grief and loss. Sometimes it's providing a meal. Sometimes it's journeying with them and listen to stories as they reflect on the loved one that they've lost or whatever it might be that they lost. See, as a disciple of Christ, this is the beautiful thing, is that we sometimes are the mourner and we are sometimes the comforter. And in order to get from mourning to comfort, we need each other. This is why all of us, this story, this command, these teachings are for you and for me as disciples of Jesus Christ. Arlene talks about the most tragic thing that could happen to a 13-year-old. Both of her parents die. But if you picked up what Arlene did, she recognized in that there was great grief, there was great loss at that time. But for the many faithful servants that came and journeyed with her, she said, there wasn't a night I went to bed without a meal. There wasn't a night I didn't have a place to lay my head. The people of God showed up. Why Jesus? Because Jesus is blessing for you and for me. Jesus is blessing for the neighbor that doesn't know Jesus. Jesus is that gift that allows us to get from a place of pain and hurt and loss and confusion, depression, anxiety, whatever it might be. And in the midst of all of those emotions, to not know we are abandoned, to know that we aren't left there, but that we can journey forward. This is the promise Christ has come to declare to you and to me. Because blessed are you poor in spirit, Blessed are you who mourn. Blessed are you who feel meek today. Blessed are you who are peacemakers and doing the work of Christ. Might you today hear these statements of promise and recognize and acknowledge an invitation for each of us into this place to receive the gift of God's never-ending promise of comfort and care, and to also be the one that carries that out. See what Jesus does, and we can't forget what Jesus says right after this. I think the disciples are a little slow. Talks about all of this. Okay. Let me talk about salt. You're the salt of the earth. Still confused? Light. You're the light of the world. Jesus is saying that to you. You are the light of the world. You are the one who can carry light into these dark places for your friends and your family and maybe a stranger. That you can allow the love of Christ to radiate off of you and through you. So that the one who you meet that is mourning, the one who is poor in spirit and lost, they too might know this gift. The gift of a God who cares about you, beloved child. Thanks be to God.
Amen.